The babysitter butcher. She was trusted by every family. In a town like Fairview, where summer block parties filled the streets and the local grocery store still carried your bags to the car, people didn't just know each other. They trusted each other. It was a place where kids still rode their bikes past dark, where neighbors dropped off casseroles during hard times, and where a sense of innocence clung to the picket fences like ivy. So when families talked about Marla Whitmore, it was always with a kind of glowing admiration, the way one might speak about a local hero. She wasn't famous or glamorous or even especially outgoing, but she was dependable. And in Fairview, that meant everything. Marla was 17, a quiet high school senior with neat handwriting, soft-spoken manners, and a collection of pastel cardigans that made her look like she'd stepped out of a storybook. Her long chestnut hair was always braided to one side, and she wore a silver cross necklace that she never took off. She got straight A's, volunteered at the animal shelter, and worked weekends at the church daycare. But what she was best known for, what made her a legend in Fairview's parenting circles, was babysitting. She wasn't just good with kids, she was perfect. The kind of sitter who made homemade snacks, brought her own craft kits, and actually got kids to fall asleep on time. Parents called her a miracle worker. Kids called her Miss Marla. Everyone else just called her when they needed someone they could trust. She had babysat for nearly half the families on East Willow Drive alone. The Parkers with the twin boys, the Hendersons and their daughter Ava, the Morellis, who had recently moved in from out of state. Every household had the same story, how sweet she was, how kind, how professional. And they all said the same thing when they handed her their child. "I'm so glad it's you." But that trust was shattered the night of November 2nd, 2006. It was supposed to be like any other Thursday. Marla had been called last minute by the Morellis, who needed someone to watch their 4-year-old son Lucas while they attended a charity dinner. They were new to the neighborhood and had gotten Marla's number from a recommendation at the local school. She arrived at 6:15 p.m. sharp, carrying a tote bag filled with storybooks and snacks. Lucas greeted her with a shy smile. By all accounts, it was an ordinary evening. Marla tucked him into bed by 8:30, cleaned up the toys, and left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter thanking the Morellis for the opportunity. She even included a little smiley face next to her name. At 11:17 p.m., the Morellis returned home to find their son in bed, still tucked in, peaceful, like he was dreaming. But he wasn't. Lucas was cold, his skin pale, lips slightly blue. At first, they thought maybe he was just in a deep sleep, but within moments, panic set in. An ambulance was called. Paramedics tried everything, but it was too late. Lucas was pronounced dead at the scene. The autopsy said cardiac arrest, a rare condition, sudden, unpredictable. The coroner called it a tragedy of nature. The Morellis were devastated. The town rallied behind them with casseroles and candles. Marla even attended the memorial, standing in the back with tears in her eyes, her cardigan buttoned to the collar. No one questioned her. Why would they? But then it happened again. 3 weeks later, on the night of November 23rd, Ava Henderson, 6 years old, healthy, playful, the light of her parents' world, was found dead in her bed. Tucked in, peaceful, just like Lucas. And once again, Marla had been the babysitter. This time, the coroner couldn't give a clear answer. No heart defect, no signs of trauma, nothing that explained it. Undetermined cause, the report read. But 2 kids, both recently watched by the same babysitter, both dead in their sleep? That was harder to ignore. People started to whisper, quietly, carefully. Was it possible? Could Marla, have done something? But the whispers were drowned out by doubt. This was Marla, after all. Everyone knew her, trusted her. She'd babysat their kids. She'd played board games in their living rooms. Surely it couldn't be her. Only one person wasn't convinced. Detective Emery Black. Emery was new to Fairview. He'd transferred from Chicago 6 months earlier, hoping to escape the chaos of the city after a messy divorce. Fairview had felt like a safe haven. He thought he'd spend his days writing up noise complaints and chasing down bike thefts. But after the second child died, he felt that familiar itch, the one that told him something wasn't right. Emery began pulling records, looking at call logs, police reports, medical files. He found 10 emergency calls in the last 2 years, all made within 24 hours of Marla babysitting a child. 2 involved unexplained allergic reactions. One was a choking incident where the child claimed their mac and cheese tasted funny. Another had gone to the hospital with dizziness and vomiting. But there had never been enough to raise suspicion, not until now. He requested Marla's school records. She'd never had a single disciplinary mark. No psychiatric reports. No signs of abuse at home. Just a quiet, average teenage girl. Except Emery didn't believe in averages. He believed in patterns, and the pattern forming around Marla Whitmore was disturbing. He tried to take his findings to his captain, suggested they question her, at least look closer, but he was met with resistance. "You want us to interrogate a 17-year-old honor student with no record and a perfect reputation?" The captain scoffed. "We don't destroy lives over hunches, Emery. This isn't Chicago." But Emery couldn't let it go. He started watching her from afar, driving past her house at night, noting her babysitting jobs, looking for anything. What he didn't know, what no one did, was that Marla already knew someone was watching her, and she was getting better at hiding her tracks. Because while everyone in Fairview saw the polite, sweet babysitter, the truth was, Marla had a darkness inside her. One she never spoke of, one she hid behind cookies and bedtime stories, one that had been growing for years, quietly, patiently, waiting for the perfect cover. And Fairview had handed it to her on a silver platter. They gave her their homes, their trust, their children. And Marla smiled every time. Detective Emery Black didn't sleep that night. He sat in his living room long after the sun dipped below the trees, the file folder on Marla Whitmore spread across his coffee table. The light from a desk lamp flickered over pages of school reports, medical examiner notes, and photos of 2 smiling children, now gone. He stared at them for hours. Ava's gap-toothed grin, Lucas's mischievous dimples, innocent, trusting, dead. He kept circling back to one detail that wouldn't leave him alone, the bedtime routine. In both cases, the parents reported that Marla had sent text updates. "He's tucked in, all good." She fell asleep right on time. The smiley face was always there, always too perfect. Emery had spent a decade in Chicago chasing people who smiled while hiding things. And in Marla's smile, he saw something dark peeking out, something patient, calculated. But in Fairview, no one wanted to believe it. The town wasn't built to hold monsters. At school, Marla was still the same. Straight posture, polite tone, never late to class. Her locker was covered with stickers of cats and sunflowers. She said hello to teachers, held the door for janitors, and never once raised her voice. When Ava Henderson's obituary ran in the local paper, she was the first to sign the guest book online. "Rest in peace, sweet girl. Heaven gained an angel." Her classmates called her kind. Her teachers called her a model student. But one girl didn't buy it. Her name was Claire Jensen. She sat 2 rows behind Marla in biology. She wasn't popular, she wasn't loud. But she noticed things, little things. The way Marla's face would twitch for a half-second whenever someone mentioned the deaths. The way she doodled the same pattern over and over again in her notebook. Tiny X's over pairs of eyes. Claire told her mom she thought something was off about Marla. Her mom laughed. "Sweetheart, don't be jealous. Marla's just a really good girl." Claire dropped it, but she started watching. One afternoon, Claire followed Marla after school. She trailed behind from a distance as Marla walked to the Morelli's house, not babysitting, just dropping off a casserole as a gesture of support. Claire watched her from behind a parked car, watched as Marla stood at the door, smiled sweetly, hugged Mrs. Morelli, handed her a dish wrapped in foil, watched as she turned and walked away, and then paused just for a second to look back at the house. But her expression wasn't sorrow. It wasn't pity. It was amusement. Claire told no one. She wasn't sure what she had seen, but she started writing things down, dates, times, faces. It became a secret journal, one she would later wish she had shared sooner. Meanwhile, Emery Black was growing more desperate. The more he dug, the more dead ends he found. Marla had no criminal record, no history of violence, nothing in her family that pointed to trauma. Her father was a retired firefighter. Her mother taught piano lessons. They went to church every Sunday. It didn't make sense. But that was exactly what made Emery certain. She had built a mask, and it was working. He needed to shake her, just once, see what cracked underneath. He arranged a casual drop-in at the Whitmore house under the pretense of community outreach. Marla's mother welcomed him with tea and cookies. Marla sat at the kitchen table working on a puzzle. She smiled when he walked in. "Hi, Officer Black. Do you like cats?" She gestured to the pieces. It was a jigsaw puzzle of kittens in a teacup. He sat across from her, studied her, watched the way her hands moved, smooth, deliberate, no fidgeting, no nervous tics. "You're quite the babysitter around town," he said. She smiled again. "I just like helping people." "I'm sure the Morellis and Hendersons appreciated that," he added slowly. Her hands paused for just a breath. Then the smile returned. "It was heartbreaking. I still think about them all the time." Her voice didn't waver, not even a little. But Emery saw it, the flicker, a microscopic break in the mask. He leaned forward. "You were the last person to see both of them alive." She blinked. "That's true? No denial? No panic? Just acceptance?" "And that doesn't bother you?" he asked. "I prayed for them." She met his gaze. "That's all I could do." Emery left with no evidence. But as he walked back to his car, he realized something that sent a chill through his spine. She wasn't scared of him. She wasn't even curious why he'd shown up, because in her mind, she was untouchable. And maybe she was, until December 1st. That's when Ethan Mulligan, a 5-year-old boy from across town, died in his sleep, tucked in, neat, peaceful. His parents had used Marla for the first time. She'd been recommended by the school counselor. "An angel," they'd said. "You're lucky to get her." 3 children, same method, same sitter, still no proof. But this time, Emery wasn't alone. After Ethan's death, Claire Jensen came forward with her journal, her notes, her suspicions. She told Emery everything, and while none of it was hard evidence, it gave him something else, a timeline, a pattern, a trail. He subpoenaed Marla's texts, her search history, her emails, and there, buried beneath recipes and Pinterest boards, he found something that chilled him to his core. Marla had a hidden folder on her computer labeled simply Stories. Inside were documents, fake diary entries written from the perspective of children with names that matched her victims. Each file was a first-person bedtime monologue. "I'm sleepy now. Miss Marla gave me apple juice and sang me a song. I hope she stays forever." Each one ended with the same sentence. "I feel funny, like I'm falling asleep forever." The whispers turned into voices. The voices turned into questions, and the questions turned into fear. By mid-December, the name Marla Whitmore had gone from being scribbled on PTA recommendation lists to being muttered in hushed tones between neighbors on frozen porches. Something was wrong with the girl everyone trusted, and the town of Fairview was waking up too late. After the death of Ethan Mulligan, the third unexplained death under her watch, people didn't just mourn, they panicked. Parents started canceling babysitting jobs. One mother drove across town just to take her son out of Marla's care halfway through a movie night. Another left a note in Marla's mailbox that simply said, "We'll handle things from now on." But Marla didn't flinch. She didn't ask why. She just stayed inside her house more, sitting by the window with that same unreadable smile stretched across her face. Inside her room, however, things weren't so calm. Her notebook, the one she kept hidden beneath her mattress, was getting fuller. Pages and pages of what looked like lullabies. But when you read them closely, they weren't songs. They were instructions, rituals, descriptions of how to soothe them into sleep forever. It wasn't just poetry. It was a blueprint. Every child had a name. Every routine, the snacks, the song, the bath, the story, was broken down step by step. Marla had been writing death into a schedule, like homework. Detective Emery Black sat in his car across from her house for 3 hours that night, his hands shaking. He had Claire Jensen's journal. He had the digital files. But none of it, not the poems, not the texts, not even the damn bedtime stories, were hard evidence. The coroner still couldn't prove what killed the children. No toxins in their blood, no sign of suffocation. It was as if something else had shut their bodies down. But Emery had something stronger than proof now. He had fear, not just his own, the town's. And in a place like Fairview, fear spreads faster than fire. The school board called an emergency meeting. Marla's mother showed up trying to hold her chin high, but everyone noticed the trembling in her hands. The room was tense, angry. Every parent had the same question. Why was no one stopping this girl? But the superintendent reminded them. She was a minor. She hadn't been charged. And without legal cause, they couldn't expel her. That didn't stop the parents from pulling their kids out in droves. By Christmas, Marla Whitmore was a ghost in her own town. She stopped going to school. She stopped babysitting. But the lights in her bedroom stayed on all night. Neighbors said they saw her sitting in the same chair for hours, just staring into nothing. Someone claimed they saw her out in the woods behind her house, barefoot, whispering to the trees. Someone else said they saw her walking down East Willow at 3 a.m., her head tilted like she was listening to something only she could hear. The town tried to ignore it, pretend it wasn't real. But then came the Henderson letter. It showed up on New Year's Eve. An unmarked envelope slid under the door of the police station. Inside was a single sheet of paper, typed, no return address. It read, "She kept a strand of Ava's hair in a jar. Look beneath her dresser." That was it. Detective Black got a warrant that night. He entered the Whitmore home with 2 officers just after midnight. Marla's parents protested at first, cried, begged, but Emery didn't stop. He went straight to her room. It looked like a dollhouse. Frilly curtains, a white desk with stickers, a pink lamp glowing softly in the corner. But when he opened the bottom drawer of her dresser, the room changed. Forever. Inside were jars, 7 of them, each one labeled with a child's name. Each one containing something, a lock of hair, a pacifier, a crayon, a tooth. And underneath the jars, photos of the children sleeping. Some of them looked peaceful, others frozen mid-frown like they sensed something was wrong just before it was too late. And at the bottom of the stack, a drawing. Marla had sketched herself in crayon, standing in the middle of a circle made of hands, children's hands, dozens of them, and written at the bottom, "They belong to me now." Marla was arrested that night. No emotion, no struggle. She walked out with her hands folded, as if she were going to a church service. Fairview exploded. The story hit the regional news within hours. Teen babysitter arrested in connection with mysterious child deaths. People lined up outside the police station just to see her being moved. Some cursed, others cried, but Marla didn't look at any of them. She looked straight ahead, blank, cold. Emery sat across from her in the interrogation room the next morning. The air was thick with silence. "You've hurt a lot of people," he said quietly. Marla looked at him, tilted her head. "I didn't hurt them," she said. "I kept them safe." He leaned in. "Safe from what?" She smiled for the first time in hours, but it wasn't warm. "The world." He stared at her. "You think what you did was merciful?" "They were already broken," she whispered. "They cried when no one was watching. Their parents didn't see it, but I did. I heard them." She paused. "They wanted to sleep." Emery stood up. He couldn't listen anymore, not without rage boiling through his chest. As he left the room, Marla's voice followed him. "You'll see," she said softly. "There's more. They talk to me every night, and they're not alone." Fairview had never seen a media truck before Marla Whitmore's arrest. Now they lined the streets like hungry wolves, cables snaking over sidewalks, microphones shoved into every face that had ever known her. The town that once trusted her now clung to the edge of hysteria. News anchors dubbed her the Babysitter Butcher. Talk shows speculated she was part of a cult. Online forums posted screenshots of her doodles, turning her school drawings into occult blueprints, but none of them knew the real horror. Not yet. Marla's trial began in early March. Snow still coated the sidewalks, but inside the courthouse, the air was scorching. Every seat was filled. Reporters, grieving families, curious strangers. The bailiff had to escort a woman out after she screamed, "She killed my baby!" as Marla was led in, calm and quiet in an oversized gray sweater. Her wrists were cuffed, but her posture never changed. She sat straight, unbothered. She even smiled as the judge read the charges. 3 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, and 1 count of aggravated cruelty. The prosecution was ready for war. Assistant DA Karen Reddick laid it out in the opening statement like a hammer to glass. This young woman was not careless. She was not incompetent. She was methodical. She executed a precise routine: food, lullaby, bedtime, followed by death. She listed the items found in Marla's drawer, the jars, the mementos, the photos, as if reading from a serial killer's playbook. The courtroom held its breath. But the defense had a different strategy: innocence by impossibility. "There is no physical evidence linking my client to any cause of death," said Public Defender Theo March. "No fingerprints on the bodies, no traces of poison, no sign of trauma. We have speculation, we have hysteria, but we do not have proof." And he wasn't wrong. The autopsy results remained maddeningly vague. No drugs, no asphyxiation, no injuries. The children's bodies had simply stopped. Every doctor called to the stand said the same phrase: undetermined cause. And that doubt, that tiny seed, was all the defense needed. Until Emery Black stepped onto the stand. He walked in with a box. Inside were the printed files from Marla's computer, the bedtime monologues she'd written from the children's point of view. He read them aloud, one by one. Lucas, Avenue Ethan, each ending the same way: "I feel funny, like I'm falling asleep forever." The courtroom was dead silent. Then he pulled out the final piece, a USB recovered from her nightstand. It contained audio files, dozens. At first, the jury assumed they were lullabies, but they weren't. They were recordings of children breathing, faint, rhythmic, until suddenly, nothing. Just silence. One clip even had Marla's voice in the background whispering, "You don't have to be scared anymore. You're safe now." Gasps filled the room. Someone wept in the back row. Still, the defense pushed back. "These recordings could be staged. There's no timestamp, no video, just sound and suggestion." But then came Claire Jensen. She stepped forward with the journal. Her account, her suspicions, her nights of watching Marla behave in ways no one else had dared notice. And that was the moment something shifted. Not in the law, in the air. The jury didn't just hear Claire's voice. They saw themselves in her eyes, full of terror that she might have been next. For days, the town clung to the radio. News alerts buzzed phones every few hours. People left flowers outside the courthouse. Some lit candles. Others lit torches. One man even tried to throw a rock through the Whitmore's window. The whole town was unraveling, not just from the crimes, but from what it revealed. Evil had been invited into their homes, and it wore a sweater and smiled. Then something strange happened. 3 days into the trial, the coroner who examined Ethan Mulligan collapsed on the stand. Heart attack, they said, but that wasn't the part that shook people. It was what he said seconds before falling. "She's still listening." Reporters ran with it. Psychics arrived. Paranormal YouTubers showed up outside the jail. They wanted to see the girl who could allegedly kill without touching. Was she a witch? A medium? A manipulator of minds? People started saying Marla had something. A presence, a gift, a curse. That she could drain a child's life by simply being in the room. Emery didn't believe in curses. He believed in patterns. And yet, every night since the arrest, he couldn't sleep. He heard soft humming in his dreams. Always the same lullaby. One he'd heard on the audio files. When he finally returned to Marla's house to finish the evidence sweep, he found something he hadn't seen before. Hidden behind the drywall in her closet, tucked into a hollowed-out space behind a coat hook. A shoebox. Inside were 7 dolls, handmade, each dressed to look like one of the children, and each had its eyes sewn shut with red thread. On the bottom of the box, one line had been written in a childlike scrawl. "They can't see the pain now." The next day in court, Emery didn't bring it up. He couldn't. Not without diving into a territory the justice system wasn't ready for. But that night, he went home and ripped out every smoke detector, every nightlight, anything that made soft sounds, and still the humming came. As for Marla, she remained calm throughout it all. When the verdict was read, guilty on all counts, she didn't cry, didn't speak. She turned her head toward the gallery, looked past the cameras, past the parents, past Emery, and smiled. But not at anyone. At something behind them. Something only she could see. And she mouthed 2 words. "It's done." Marla Whitmore was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom broke into applause the moment the gavel fell, but Marla never blinked. She didn't cry, didn't tremble, didn't even flinch. She just stood, nodded once to the judge, and walked away in her gray sweater like it was a routine dentist appointment. That was the last time anyone in Fairview saw her in person. But her shadow didn't leave. It crawled down the school hallways she used to walk, seeped into the bedrooms of children she'd never touched, and pressed into the minds of parents who still couldn't sleep without checking that their doors were locked. Twice. Marla's name wasn't just a headline. It became a whisper kids used to scare each other, a modern-day boogeyman, a fairy tale soaked in truth. They called her the girl who put you to sleep forever. 6 months after the sentencing, the Whitmore house went up for sale. No one bought it, not even the investors. Some said it was because of the crime. Others swore they'd seen lights flickering inside, even though the electricity had been cut. A local priest came and sprinkled holy water across the lawn. The house sat empty, rotting, waiting, as if it still had something left to say. Detective Emery Black quit the force 4 weeks after Marla was locked away. Not because he couldn't handle the case, but because he couldn't handle the silence that followed. He said it was like something had been broken open in the town, and whatever had crawled out didn't go back in. Emery moved away, left no forwarding address, and told no one where he went. But then the letters started coming. One showed up at the home of Ava Henderson's mother. Another arrived at the Morellis, a third at the Mulligans. No return address, no stamps. just tucked into mailboxes. Each envelope contained a single drawing, a child sleeping peacefully with Marla standing next to their bed. And always, always, in the corner of the page, that same line in her handwriting, "They're still safe." People thought maybe it was a prank, a sick joke. But the paper? It was from Marla's old sketch pad, the one police had cataloged and bagged, which meant someone either broke the evidence lockup or Marla was still sending things out from inside. An internal investigation was launched at the prison. They tore through her cell. Nothing. No contraband, no internet access, no pens, not even paper. But when they checked her mattress, they found that the fabric had been ripped open, and inside, dozens of drawings. All of them different. All of them showing children. Some were the ones we knew. Lucas, Avenue Ethan. But others weren't. There were kids no one had ever seen before. Kids who weren't from Fairview. Kids whose names were written beneath them, names the police didn't recognize until they searched. One name matched a child who died in Idaho in 2003. Same age range, same circumstances, same cause of death, undetermined. Another belonged to a girl who died in Georgia in 2005. Same pattern, tucked into bed, no struggle, no sound, no explanation. And Marla had drawn them years before the trial. No one could explain it, not legally, not scientifically. But slowly, investigators began to realize something sickening. Marla hadn't started killing in Fairview. She'd brought it with her. The town wasn't the origin. It was the final chapter. She had lived in 3 other towns before Fairview. Families had moved. Kids had vanished. Deaths had been written off. And all the while, Marla had been collecting them, keeping souvenirs, making art out of innocence, and smiling. One of the officers assigned to catalog the evidence resigned after a week, said he kept hearing a child's voice whisper, "Thank you," in the back of his squad car, even when he was alone. Another guard at the prison claimed Marla talked in her sleep every night, but not to herself, to someone. "She giggles," he said, "like she's with friends." By then, the media had moved on. The story faded from the front page. New horrors took its place. But Fairview never healed. Some families moved away. Others sent their kids to private school in other counties. The house on East Willow remained empty, the grass waist-high, the door still nailed shut. But every Halloween, without fail, someone leaves a candle at the front steps. Just one. Lit at midnight. Always with a note. For the ones who didn't wake up. No one ever sees who does it. And Marla? Marla never confessed, not once. But she wrote one final letter. It was found taped under the bench in her cell, discovered the night before she was transferred to a maximum security mental facility. The letter read, "Some lullabies are meant to end. But I'm still singing. They still hear me. And some of them still need to sleep." The prison tried to dismiss it, said it was just the rambling of a broken mind. But then came the incident at the hospital. During Marla's psychological evaluation, the nurse assigned to monitor her rounds fell unconscious while sitting outside her room. No health issues, no trauma. Just stopped breathing for 2 minutes, until she suddenly gasped back to life, screaming one sentence, "Her eyes aren't her own." She quit the next morning. Now, years later, the name Marla Whitmore still sends chills down the spine of anyone who's ever left their child with a sitter and wondered, what really happens when the lights go out? We all want to believe that evil is obvious, that we'd recognize it when it walks through our front door. But sometimes, evil is neat, polite, helpful. Sometimes it bakes cookies, plays peekaboo, and sings your baby to sleep. And sometimes, it smiles at you from across the crib and doesn't leave when you come back. So tonight, when you kiss your children goodnight, listen closely. If you hear humming in the dark, if your baby monitor clicks even though no one touched it, If your child says a new name, one you don't remember ever saying out loud, don't wait. Don't reason, just check. Because monsters don't always hide under the bed. Sometimes, they tuck you in. If stories like this leave you thinking twice before turning out the lights, then hit that like button, subscribe to channel, and share it with someone who still thinks the world is always safe. This has been Uncle Luke Tells, and I'll see you in the dark.